We are in the fourth reading. Okay, fourth reading. We are learning the architecture of the Mishkan, the Holy Temple, or rather the tabernacle, not the Holy Temple. Although, till now, what we've learned actually is things that were in the Holy Temple, the candelabra, the Ark of the Covenant, so on and so forth. Now we're going to go actually into the tabernacle itself, meaning the Mishkan itself. So we're in chapter 26, verse 15. Vasisa, and you shall make as a krushim. The krushim are the planks. The word keresh makes up the word sheker. The letters turned around. The lie of the world, we make it into a home for God. We transform it into a home for God. The Mishkan, make it for a Mishkan, Atze, shiti made from acacia wood, oimdim, that are standing vertically. Also, shitim comes from the word shtus, folly. The lie of the world, the folly, right? The advice of folly, we transform it now and make it into a home of God. That's the mimer from Yuchvat, right? Bosi Lagani. Okay, if you can put that away, it's not for now. It's for David. It's for later. Take it. But just just take it and put it on top over there. Okay. Today's learning is in honor of the first yortzeit of Yitzchak ben Shalom. His neshama have an aliyah. Okay. So Rashi in 15. Asisa krushim. Make the krushim, the planks, the beams. Haya leilemar asisa krushim. It should have said, should make the beams without the hay, hakrushim. The hay in front of it makes it. You have the right page. You have the page there, David?
I think so.
Yeah, it's chapter 26, verse 15. Yeah? Got it? Okay. So the hay makes it the beam instead of you shall make beams. As it says, each item, in the discussion of this, the construction of the Mishkan, Ma'u hakrashim. So why say the beams, right? Rather than just beams. From those that have been standing as designated for that purpose. So this was the Torah studies on Sunday, was based on this wasn't here, this Rashi, but a different one. So Jacob, our forefather, he planted shittim trees in Egypt. And when he was dying, he commanded his sons to take them up with him when they would depart from Egypt. But Amar, and he said, Amar lehem, and he said to them, and what's going to happen, you're going to get out of Egypt and you're going to be in the desert, and God's going in the future to ask you to make a Mishkan out of shittim wood. See to it that you have it ready in hand. And this is what on which the Babylonian based line of the Piyut. Tas mata mizarozim, planting the roused flew from Egypt to become kaidris batim arozim, to become the shittim beams of the temple. I'm not certain where that's from. Okay, so in other words, he wanted to make sure that it would be there prepared in advance. So Yaakov buried them and they grew in the land of Egypt. And then they were taken out from there and they were prepared to make the home for God. You have to press the two things together. So shitim wood standing erect. In Old French is tantiva. Means the length of the beam should be standing upright along the walls of the Mishkan, making the walls of the Mishkan. You can lie beams this way, right? Build this way, like a log cabin, you make it this way, right? Logs go this way. No, it's supposed to go this way. Okay. Yeah. You want to follow along, Kenny? Take a book. Okay. So and the width of the beam should be in the height of the walls, one beam on top of the other. Now, don't do that. You're doing it standing up erect. Oops. See that? Okay. Verse 16. Eser Amos, 10 Amos. An Amma is a hand's breadth, approximately 1.5 feet. So 10 Amos, Oirech HaKeresh, is the height of the plank. The Amma V'chetzi, and 1.5 of these, right? Rechav HaKeresh is the width of the plank, ha'echad, of one of them. Rashi, in 16. Eser Amos Eirech HaKeresh. So there are 10 Amos in the length of each beam. So obviously this teaches us that the height of the Mishkan was 10 Amos, about 15 feet high. Right? And on top of that, we learned yesterday was the goat skin and the different skins that were serving as a making it into an oil, into a tent, a covering. Next Rashi, Amma v'chetzi Amma rechem, 1.5 Ammas is its width. Mishkan. So this teaches that the length of the Mishkan, for there are 20 beams that were from north to south, right, in a row. And others on the north side and on the south side, there were 20 beams each, right? They were going from east to west. Shleishim Ammas, so that would make it 30 Ammas altogether, which is about 45 feet. Why Rashi says this over here when we didn't give the amount of how many planks there were? I don't know. Follow my question, David? Rashi says that the full length of the Mishkan was 30 Ammas because there were 20 planks. Each plank 1.5. So 1.5 times 20 is 30 Ammas, right? But why would Rashi say this here when we don't have yet the amount of planks that there are to make the Mishkan? Okay. Okay. 17. Shtei yades. Each plank had 2 hands. It says here tenons. Translates over here. Two things sticking in order to go in, as we will see in a moment here. Actually, here's the picture. See the picture? These two down here, and they went into the silver sockets to hold it up. For each plank. Mishu laves isha elachaisa, that they were parallel one to the other. Kain tasa l'chol kasher mishkan, so you shall do to all the planks of the Mishkan. Rashi. Okay, so Rashi says, two hands for each plank, two tenons, two that are sticking out. So they would carve the beam from the bottom, the emtza in the middle, the height of an amma, which is again about 1.5 feet. And they would leave a quarter of the width of the side on one side and then on the other side, and that's how you get two hands, two tenons. And the groove occupied half of the width of the beam in the center. You see here in the picture, each beam, there's a half of the width is carved out. So therefore that leaves you with a quarter and a quarter, because so you have like this. You have half in the middle. The sticking part out, the tenon, is a quarter, right? And there's a quarter on each side. So you have you have two hands that are making a half, and then two other opening on the sides of them that make a half, because they're a quarter each, and therefore that gives you 1.5. Okay. And those tenons would insert into the sockets because the sockets were hollow, and the sockets were high an amma. And they were stationed in an unbroken line. 40 of them, one next to the other. And the tenons of the beam that were inserted into the hollow of the sockets are carved away on 3 of their sides. And the width of the part of the carved away of the beam and the outer side of the tenon equaled the thickness of the rim of the socket. So here, look at this over here. You can see each one entered its own socket. Say 2 sockets for the 2 hands that were sticking out, tenons that were sticking out from each plank. So there are 20 planks. How many sockets? 40, right? Because there are 2 for each plank. And each socket then was a quarter opening and a quarter on each side of an amma. Hope you got that. It's easier with pictures than to read it. Huh?
What held the sockets together?
Well, sockets were very heavy, right? They were made from silver.
Right.
So I would imagine that they just were, positioned. Remember that here, we didn't get to it yet, but the beams had also the poles that went through them, right? So that held the beams together, right? So then they wouldn't wobble. And I think the sockets were just very heavy. Although the beams were very heavy themselves, 15 ammas high and 1.5 wide. That's that's a pretty heavy piece of wood.
Sure.
It was. Okay, this is what it means that they were fitted at the bottom. That they would carve out from the sides of the tenons. She is in order so that the beams should be joined one next to the other without the sockets causing a gap between them. Mishulavas. Mishulavas means rung-like. Asuyas can mean shlibas sulam. They're made like rungs of a ladder. One second. Right. Muvdala zumizum. They were separated one from the other. Omeshupim rashehem, and at their ends they were tapered. In order to fit in the hollow of the socket. Kishliba hanichnes has been nekeb amudi sulam, like the rung that fits into the hole of the uprights of the ladder. Right. So, yeah, a ladder. Right. You need to make holes on the sides of them in order that you can put the rungs in. Right, that they should fit. So the same thing is here, the beams had to have, carved out in order that it should be able to fit into the sockets. Next, Rashi, Isha lachaisa. By the way, you know what Isha lachaisa means, literally? A woman to her sister, right? That's what it means literally. Is that what it means here? It means one to the other. It just brings out the idea that everything in Torah has a male and female quality to it. One is opposite the other. That the carved out part would be equal. One would be a measure like the other. So the two tendons would not be drawn out to the middle or to the outside, but avi akerish in the thickness of the beam. Amma, which was an amma. Thickness of the beam was amma v'chetzi, was mean it was an amma. Targum sheyodas tziri, and the translation of yodes, which means hands, is tenons, according to Onkelos. Or no, Onkelos mean pivots. Lafi shedemus tziri adelas. They're like the pivots of the door. Shenichnasim b'chayra miftan, that they fit into the holes of the threshold. Okay. Next. See, says Rashi, and you should make the planks, the beams, the Mishkan for the Mishkan Esrim, 20 Keresh Lefas Negba Teimana, that you should make on the south. Negba is south. Teimana side. To the south side, there should be 20 planks. Rashi Lefas Negba Teimana Ein Peyazu Lashin Miktsaya. This word Peya does not mean corner over here. Ela hu ruach kriya peya, but it means the side that's called a peya. Kitargumai, as Onkelos translates it, the ruach aver dreimi, for the south-facing side. So that's what it means, south-facing side. Because the word peya, right? The word peya in Torah is used for the corners of the field that you need to leave for the poor. So you might think that that word over here means the corner. Well, of course it doesn't. Here it means the south side, so the south-facing side. Then he says, for those 20 planks, our boyim adne kesef, there should be 40 silver bases, taseh, that you should make tachas esrim akerish, for the 20 planks. Shnei adanim, 2 sockets, tachas akerish, underneath the planks, the beams, one beam. Lishtei yades, for the 2 tenons, or the two hands that are sticking out from the beam, Ushnei Adonim, and two sockets, Tachas HaKerish, under the beam, Hayachad one, L'shtei Yadais for its two yad. Okay, Uletzela Mishkan, and to the side of the Mishkan, Hasheni is the second side, Lifas Sofen Esrim Kerish, to the side of the north, Esrim Kerish, also 20 planks. Barboim Adonim, and there'd be 40, and we're at verse 21, 40 Adonim, sockets, Kesef that are made from silver, Shnei Adonim, two Adonim Tachas HaKerish, under each plank, beam, Hayachad, one. Ushnei Adonim Tachas HaKerish Hayachad, and two sockets under each plank. Socket, you could call it base, it calls it here. But the Yakisei HaMishkan Yama, and to the back side of the Mishkan, the Yama to the west, Tasei Shisha crushing. There you make 6 planks. So you got 20, 20, and now 6, right? Here, want to see a picture? Here you got 20 planks, 40 Adanim, each, and here you got 6. Although it's showing 8 over here because it's got the corners. 6 are on the west side, and then there's 2 corners. What is that? Is that called south or north? Is it called east or west? It's called a corner. That's why it's not included. Which therefore, by the way, means what? Means it's on the outside, not on the inside. Because if the 6 were on the inside, right, it's not, as we will see. Okay, Rashi in 22. Yeah, we're good. I know this is this is architecture. Yeah, you're in architectural school. Soon, right now. I mean, architecture, engineering, it's, you have to know one of that. One has to know the other a bit, right?
Right.
Okay. 22 in Rashi, the Yarkasei. Yarkasei, so he says this word means Lashon Seif. It means end. Kitargumai, as Uncle says, Lesayafe, which means at the ends, meaning what's the end? The west side of the Mishkan is the end. Why is it called the end? The west side? Because we'll see later, you enter into the area from the east. So if you're entering from the east, the west is at the end, right? Felicia has, okay, look what he's going to say. He's going to say it. Because the entrance is on the east, and the east of the mission is called the front. So the west side, of course, is the back then, and this means the end. For the front is the beginning. Tase shisha krashim, you should make 6 planks, beams. Haretesha amas rechav. So it means it's 9 amas its width. Okay. Now he's going to go to the corner ones I mentioned to you. Oshnei krashim tasa the miktzai and the mikut tzais. Mishkan. You should make 2 planks to the corners of the Mishkan, B'yarkasayim, at the end. Rashi. Shnei krashim tasa and the miktzayim. So make 2 beams at the corners. One is the northwest corner, and one is the southwest corner. And the 8 beams are arranged on one row. But these 2 corner ones are mentioned separately in the verse. Why? Because they're not entirely visible within the interior of the Mishkan. They're the corners. They actually will be partially, as Rashi will say. Ela chetzi ama mizu v'chetzi ama mizu nidras b'chala. But rather, half an amma would be visible on from one corner, and half an amma from the other corner. Why? Because the thickness of it was
1.5. So
1.5.
1.5 is 9. It's 10. A half and a half.
No, yeah, no. There's height, width, and then there's thickness. We didn't get thickness yet, right? Right. We didn't get thickness yet. So here,
10 is the width, the outer width, not the inner width.
well, right now what we have is 9 is the inner, because 6 times 1.5 is 9, right?
No, but there's a piece that's still looking on the inside of the corners.
Oh, so that's where he's going to come. You're going to get half here and half there. That's going to give you 10. That's why the inside would be 10 amos, right? Okay. Okay. So lahashmim rachbei lesser, this fills it out to 10 amas. An amma width of the beam on each side. So you're left with half. So from there we know that the thickness is an amma. Boys keneged amas avikashi amishkan atzofim bedorim. So it corresponds to the thickness of the beams on the north and south sides that were an amma. So then the corners would be on the outside would be even. Again, here, let's take a look at the picture. So if on the outside the corners are even, right? It's a perfect 90 degree, or not 90, 45 degree. That's a 45 degree, right? Angle over here. Huh?
90.
A 90 degree. Right. A 90 degree angle. And so it's a perfect corner, and on the inside, therefore it gives you a total of 10. Okay. We're at 24 now. V'yu seimim l'malmata. Seimimim means aligned over here. Melamata at the bottom, yachtav together. Yu samim al reishay, and there will be flush at the top. El hatabas ha'echas, for one hatabas is a ring or a band. It translates over here. So it has to be for the two planks that are in the corners. They have to be flush. Rashi in 24. Oops. They should be the beams shall be fitted to one another at the bottom. So that the thickness of the rims of two sockets should not make a gap between them. That there would be any distance one beam to the other. And that's what I explained. That the pivots of the tendons which should be carved out on their sides, so that the width of the beam projects to its sides, beyond the tendons of the beam, right? You had a quarter of an amma on each side. That way it covered the rim of the socket. The socket had, on the bottom, it had a quarter of an amma on each side, and on the sides of the beam were also a quarter, so it covered it perfectly. Likewise, the next beam that was next to it. So that means that we're fitted, in a flush manner, one next to the other. And the corner beam on the western row was carved away along its width in its thickness. So where were its tenons? They were on the back side or on the north-south side. So Rashi said they're on the north-south side. Today, surely, Fridu Adoni Beneim. So the socket should not separate between them. Tamim. Listen, it means parallel. Al Raishe Shel Kerish at the top of the plank. The Tabasa Achas. So it had a band. Rashi. Right, it had this ring. Each beam was carved out on top along its width. Two grooves at its two sides. In order that the ring's thickness, they will insert it each with two pieces of the sides, two adjacent beams formed by carving grooves into one ring. So the beam was then fitted closely to the one next to it. But as far as those rings were concerned, I don't know if they were fixed into the two beams which they connect or they were removable. And regarding the beams at the corner, the ring is in the thickness of the westernmost southern and the westernmost northern beam. In the top of the corner of the beams, western row opposite go in. So the two walls in the western and the southern or the northern are connected. Here, let's see the picture again. Doesn't show it here. Here you see there's rings here, rings here and here, right? Okay. So now on the west side, where there's 8 beams, Vadneim Kesev, Shisha Asar Adanim, 16 sockets made out of silver. Each beam had 2 sockets. So 2 sockets under each plank. Not certain. Sounds like this is somewhat repetitive. Not clear on it. Okay, so these are the 8 beams, which we mentioned earlier. 6 beams and then 2 corner beams, right? So if you look at it comes out, okay, well, no, this is actually not repetitive because it's telling us that there has to be 8 beams on the western row, which means that they're on the outside, not on the inside. Shnuya b'Mishnah Ma'aseh Seder Krashim b'Mlechsa Mishkan. So if they were the inside, then guess what? They would the inside measurement would be 12 amos, not 10, right? V'ayu Isis Adanim Chalulim. So again, the sockets were made hollow. V'charitz Kerish Malamata L'Revim Mikan Revim Mikan. I don't know why Rashi is repeating here that you carve out on the beam a quarter on each side. And cut away half of the width of the beam in the middle of the beam. And cut away half of the width of the beam in the middle. So there's mukim, and make two tendons like a two chamukin. It's the first time Rashi says that. I don't know what that is. V'li nira here's a kamin shnei chazakin, means like two chabakin. Kamin shnei shaliba sulam, like two rungs in a ladder. Maduzazu. Like, what's Rashi saying here? But we already went through this. I don't know why. And they were tapped. They were tapered to fit firmly in the hollow of the socket. And this is what the word mishulava is, right? Like rungs. So it's going to mean shliva. Okay. 27. Sisa brichin. Now I'm making, right? We said about making rings on there, right? Now you're going to make crossbars and they're going to go through the rings in order to hold the planks. So you're going to make brichim, these crossbars, atze shitim, made from the acacia wood, chamisha, five for the planks on one side of the Mishkan. Rashi, brichim. So understood like unclis, kitarguma, abrim, bars. Balaz in an old French is pare, Chamisha l'kash yitzela Mishkan, five for the beams on one side of the Mishkan. Ela chamisha shleisha the five bars are in a sense are three. Elisha habriach ha'elyon v'atachtin also mishtei chatichos. Right, but the Torah is calling them five because the upper and lower bars are made of two pieces. Zu mavriach min chatzia kaisol. The two pieces extend in the middle of the wall, and the other, it extends in the middle of the wall. Then so one goes into the rings inserted into the side of the beams on one side of the wall, and the other goes on the other side of the wall. Right? Look, kind of makes sense. Until they reach each other. Nimsa arba. So the upper and lower bars are two bars, which are four, right? Because it went on one side, a bar on top, a bar in the middle, and then the bottom rather. That's on one side. And then on the other side, it went a bar that went through the rings, right? Held by the rings to fasten and hold the Mishkan, the planks upright until they met each other. That was four, and then you had the middle one, which we will explain shortly. But the middle bar corresponds to the entire wall. Because it extends from one end of the wall to the other. Shenemar. Because the middle bar, it says it extends from one end to the other. The upper and lower bars had rings to be inserted. There were two rings for each beam. One on top, one on the bottom. Right? And you inserted the wood into there. And it was three-part arrangement. Within the 10 amos of the height of the beam. So one beam went through the top, and one went through the bottom, like over here in the picture. Okay. If you follow this, folks, you could all be architects for the forthcoming third Beis Hamikdash. Yeah. Each section, the two are a quarter of the length of the beam. And two section, double size section between one ring and the other. The rings were measured off precisely in accordance to the measurements. In order that all the rings should be aligned one to the other. Right. But the central bar had no rings. What they did was hollowed out in the beam, in the middle of the beam, they hollowed, right, to go, that they should put a beam through the inside, and you didn't see it on the outside. And the central bar would go into the beams through the holes. And they were aligned one to another. That's what it says. The central bar within the beams. And the upper and lower bars were then from the north and south. The length of each one was 15 amas. Was 30 amas. There was also, they had like this. Yeah, the whole thing was 30 amas, right? So the two on top, so you had one going from this direction and one going from this direction on top, right? So they met each other, right? They aligned with each other. Then you had on the bottom the same thing. That gives you 4. The middle one was just one that went straight through 30. That was a pretty long, right? Pretty long piece of wood that they got, that they made perfectly to go through from one end to the other. And that gave you 5, right? That gave you 5. Here's what the Mariv. So the same thing on both sides of them. Okay, let's finish off over here. And likewise, there are 5 crossbars that were for the planks on the other side of the Mishkan. And also for the back wall, there was also 5. But the crossbar that went in the midsection right? That was holes that were drilled through the planks, and it went from one end to the other. There's a kroshim, it's a pena, and the planks, you should overlay it zahav with gold. There's tabaiseyim tasizav, and the gold rings, and the rings make them out of gold. Batim lebrichim, they are to house the crossbars. Tzivisa zabrichim zav, and also the crossbars overlay it with gold. 29. Batim lebrichim, housing for the bars. Hatabaz shetasa behem, the rings that you should make for the beings. Iyo batim lekanis behem brichim, they should be housing the bars that are inserted in them. Tzivisa zabrichim zav, and you should cover the bars with gold. Loisha haya zav mudbak al habrichim, not that the gold was stuck on the bars. Shein aleim shum tzipui, because there's no covering on them. But rather they were fixed to the beam, something like two mouths of gold. Mishnei Sikte Kana Chalula. Like the two sections of holiness. And they would fix it next to a ring to the other side, on both sides rather. The length would fill the width of the beam on either side of the ring, and the bar would go into them from the middle of the tabas, and from into one ring, from one ring to the second mouth of a ring that would enter. So the bars are found to be covered with gold when they are thrust into the beams. And these bars were projected outside of the Mishkan. And the rings were not visible inside of the Mishkan. But it was flat from within. Last pasuk, and you should erect the Mishkan according to its law, as I showed you by the mountain. Rashi, a Mishkan, after you finish building it, then erect it, put it together. That which I showed you at the mountain, before this, so beforehand, because later I will teach you and show you how to it should be done. Okay. Phew. Okay. Degrees are coming.